Well, hello. My name is Angelle Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Something I have planned in this new season of the show is collaboration. Last week, I dropped a bonus episode in the feed from a show I guested on over the summer with UK friends, The Red Rabbit Hole. We talked about one of the most notorious cases in Massachusetts. Because crime is history, and sometimes history is crime. We talked about the Bordens of Fall River. We talked about the case and did a mock retrial of sorts on the guilt or innocence of Lizzie Borden. Spoiler, she was acquitted. On this week's show, a special collaboration with Nina Innsted, creator and host of Already Gone podcast. About Nina, she is a Michigan native, podcast host, victims advocate, as well as an administrator for the Missing in Michigan Facebook group. It is a large group with a membership totaling more than 135,000. Now, Nina is well-versed in missing persons cases. She recently appeared on another podcast called Mind Over Murder with Bill Thomas, another Massachusetts person, and co-host Kristen Dilley, where they talked about missing person scams. And I learned a great deal of new information about what goes right and wrong when somebody becomes a missing person. I first met Nina last year when I attended my first true crime podcast festival in Austin, Texas. Incidentally, that is also where I first met Bill Thomas. We bonded over Massachusetts and radio, a story for another time. Nina was one of the first people I met at that conference. Me, the newbie podcaster, totally out of my element of loud rock and roll shows, where I know almost everyone in that room. This was all new territory, and Nina was so kind and so helpful from the first moment I walked over to her, holding a plate of hummus and carrots probably, at a podcast host mixer. In this episode, we cover a lot of territory, including this phenomenon of missing person scams and what they become. We talk about the stark realities families face when a loved one goes missing, challenges in law enforcement's response, and all the barriers that exist. Now about Nina. Her podcast, Already Gone, began in 2016 and covers often lesser-known true crime cases in the Great Lakes area. And because I aim to learn something on every show, and I hope you do too, what are the Great Lakes? I live in Massachusetts. We have beautiful lakes and the ocean, but the Great Lakes, they're something. Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. Those 5 lakes and their connecting channels form the largest fresh surface water system on Earth. Those rivers and dams that connect them create an entire system about the size of the United Kingdom and France combined. 8 states border the Great Lakes. Do you know them? It's not a test. Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. What else I learned about the Great Lakes? There are a lot of shipwrecks. Thousands of shipwrecks. An exact number? Unknown. With some estimates saying 6,000 to 10,000 well-preserved wrecks. In the cold and fresh water, keeping many of them intact below the surface. Now, I had heard about this, but now I'm fascinated. And the photos I've seen are incredible. And now I want to go to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum in a place called Paradise, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, the UP, as it's known. I've heard. I had old friends from there. Now I could go on for about an hour about how awesome the Great Lakes are now that I've been obsessively looking at shipwrecks in the beautiful water of the Great Lakes. I'll rabbit hole on my own time. We toss around a lot of names in this conversation. fellow podcasters, some family members of missing and murdered people, various cases, events, advocates, and the like. All of which I list on the show notes and in the episode notes at crimeofthetruestkind.com. You can follow Nina online, ninainnsted.com. It's INNSTED, at Nina Innsted on Instagram. The Missing in Michigan Facebook group is linked in the notes. You can also search for it, Missing in Michigan. Already Gone is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the places you choose to listen to your stories. Follow Already Gone Pod on Facebook and Instagram. This is episode 73. Don't go missing in America. All right, so I like to share some data. I say it different every time. blackandmissinginc.com says in 2023, missing persons under the age of 18, 53% were identified as white, including Hispanic, 40% identified as African American, 4% identified as Asian and Indian, 3% unknown. 50% of missing persons are labeled female, 50% labeled male. I mean, that kind of does throw a wrench in it's only ladies that disappear. I don't mean to be smug, but it is a true crime trope. According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database, also known as NamUs, which is funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, more than 600,000 people go missing every year. Approximately 4,400 unidentified people are recovered each year. Nationwide, there are roughly 6.5 missing persons per 100,000 people. In a Newsweek report, roughly 2,300 Americans are reported missing every day. In Newsweek's reporting from February 2024, they say Oklahoma has the largest percentage of missing people in America, with 16 per 100,000 residents. Arizona, with 14.2. On the West Coast, just behind that is Oregon, with 12.5 per 100,000 people, followed by Washington State at 10.8. California has 8.6. So comparatively speaking, New England states have some of the lowest in the U.S. My home state of Massachusetts, 2.7, followed by the smallest state in the Union, Rhode Island, at 2.6. And the Great Lakes states also have some of the lowest. Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, 3.3 per 100,000. Michigan, Nina's state, has 6 per every 100,000 residents. But there is no federal requirement for reporting to NamUs. Dr. Jesse Goliath from the Mississippi Repository for Missing and Unidentified Persons told Newsweek that the real figures are higher than the federal statistics show. So what they are saying is without mandatory reporting by law enforcement, the number of actual missing persons state by state is actually much higher than this data is telling us, or data. Nina and I are going to cover a lot of ground coming up next in our conversation. Please support Crime of the Truest Kind, and there are a number of ways you can do so. Listen to the show. Tell your friends about it. Share it on social media. Post a link on one of your favorite Facebook groups. Are you on Reddit? Leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to the merch store. Buy some merch. Drop a tip in the jar. You will be giving the dogs a bone. They are obsessed and about to start yelling at me for more treats. Become a patron on Patreon with 4 tiers starting at just $1. All links at crimeofthetruestkind.com. I learned pretty quickly when I started to meet people, and really the biggest aha moment was going to the festival, looking around and getting a sense of what's happening, what people are like who have been doing this for a little while. And then I started to meet people. I started to meet families and hearing from families. And that was everything.
Yeah.
That was truly everything.
It gives you a lot of perspective.
It sure does. How did it start for you? Because you've been at it for quite a bit.
So In 2015, my daughter developed agoraphobia, which means she didn't want to leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
She was 8 or 9 and wouldn't go to school. I couldn't leave her home alone because she was too little, so I had to quit my job, which I was fine with. I was ready to leave teaching and stay home with her. And I was listening to podcasts so that I wouldn't go crazy from a lack of adult content, adult interaction. And called my husband one day and he's like, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, it's all right. You know what? I think I want to start a podcast. And he came home with a microphone. A few months later, I started the podcast.
What brought you to this format? What was it about crime that attracted you?
I'm dating myself here, but when I was a little girl, like a toddler, the Oakland County child killer was killing kids in Oakland County where I lived and took a girl from my neighborhood. So there's always been this stranger danger serial killer vibe, and he was never caught. My whole life has been wondering who the Oakland County child killer is. So I've always been interested in true crime. And then growing up, my mom always had the pulp novels, the true crime ripped from the headlines, paperbacks laying around. So I did a lot of reading.
My beloved Nana, who lived well into her 90s, smoked like a fiend from when she was about 12 years of age. So I don't know what magic was inside her, but she used to read those very graphic detective magazines.
Yeah.
And I was a little girl looking over her shoulder going, I don't know what's happening. But to say I liked it seems really morbid, but something stuck.
Yeah.
But my parents didn't seem to have it, or did they know? Who knows? They didn't have any reservation with my Nana reading these very graphic magazines. Yeah, I blame my Nana for at least planting the seed, and then it just grew and grew and grew until, before we even knew what true crime was.
Right.
We talk about what's big in the news right now. There's this new interest in the Menendez brothers case. That was true crime when that was going on, when the parents were murdered by the boys, they did it. People were fascinated because it was true crime, but we didn't know what true crime was.
Yeah, I remember leaving work to go home and watch the O.J. Simpson verdict come in.
I remember that was bananas.
Yeah.
Absolutely bananas. Let's talk about the missing persons scams that are cropping up online. When I heard your episode with Bill and Kristen from Mind Over Murder, I was like, these are the things I've been talking about. People, when you say something to someone and say, hey, careful. I've gotten pushback from people when they say, well, I think their family would really want them found. And I would gently say, sometimes I would respond and say, yes, they certainly would. However, or this child was missing and has been located. This photograph you're passing around, I love that you're caring about this missing child. This child has since been found about 6 months ago. And I didn't know all of those things that you explained, that it's the bait and switch and who's baiting and what they're switching. Because I know that you run Missing in Michigan.
Yeah, I run the online.
That amazing resource for people in the area. How soon did you figure it out that this was a game?
I didn't realize what people were doing. I just knew they weren't real posts. The first thing I look for is police contact information or a phone number of any kind. Generally, these were being posted with no date, no phone number, and no way to get in touch with someone. It was just like a panicked, flood your feeds, share widely, share this post. And over the last almost 6 years, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of missing persons posts. So I know what they're supposed to look like. And I know how the originating poster is supposed to be acting. And not everybody acts the same, but there's a pretty standard set of things to look for. And I just wasn't seeing them. So I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. And then I try and track down, I would message the person or look at their profile and go, that's a fake profile. So I would just no, we're deleting it. That's not legitimate. But then I realized what they were doing is they were creating these posts of a missing child or a found dog or a missing grandpa and getting people to share them widely. And then the post would suddenly convert to property for rent or for sale or an office availability, some sort of sales related post. And it's just so disappointing that people take advantage of people's good nature and people wanting to help with something like that.
People just don't understand. They don't understand what's at stake. You see them in yard sale posts. Missing dog, and I have 5 dogs, so I'm very concerned. And then you think, why are they posting this in a yard sale page? Because it's going to turn into something else.
Right.
Nothing tugs at your heartstrings like somebody's missing little child.
Exactly. We worry about kids. I, look out for other people's kids all the time, as people should. So when you see that a child is missing, it strikes at the heart of you and you're like, oh, I've got to help. I've got to share this, do what I can to support this family at an upsetting time. And then to be duped by some scammer who's looking to sell something is just gross.
It's abominable, but that's the nature of, unfortunately, the internet. As have been evidenced, I'm sure, throughout your course, your journey into true crime and advocacy, which is a big driver for you and is a big driver for me as I'm learning. You want to do as many of the right things as you possibly can to help families. And I recently had an interview with a family member of a woman who went missing and they found deceased and unsolved. I'm hoping to support that family more. But what I learned about their case and so many others is they have absolutely no idea what to do, how to do it, who to reach out to. They knew, this family in particular, knew within a few hours after their sister and daughter didn't come home, somebody who was very reliable, somebody who was regimented, would go to work, was a fabulous employee, didn't come home with the dad's car by 8 o'clock, wasn't there, by 9 o'clock wasn't home. They're all in the back of their mind. They're very worried. But it wasn't until the next morning when they woke up and she wasn't home that they knew something was wrong. They go to their local police department, and their local police department says, she's 23 years old. Nah, we're not going to take a report.
Which is so frustrating.
Have we not moved on from that place where police officers tell family members you have to wait before we'll accept a report? Is that still happening?
So in my experience, I've worked with a lot of police departments, and I'm on the phone with the police several times a week, because I'll get a missing persons report and then I'll call the department and verify that it's a legitimate report and let them know that I've got a post on Facebook that they're welcome to share, that we're getting the person out on social media. And it really varies from department to department, the reaction I get. Sometimes it's, oh my gosh, great, thanks for helping. And other times it's like, I'm not even going to tell you that there's a missing persons report. It's none of your business. So the culture at various police departments determines the reaction they're going to get, that a family is going to get when they file a report or attempt to file a report. That comes from the leadership of the department.
There's no rule among police forces at anywhere. They can decide whether they will or they won't.
Yeah.
The question came up when you were saying that, Nina, is that also the case with a missing person who gets added into, say, one of the databases, one of the clearinghouses for missing folks? It's something that, as I understand it, law enforcement has to do that. A family member can't go to like NamUs and add their loved one, correct?
As far as I know, NamUs cannot be edited by just anyone. Best practice would be for a law enforcement agency, after someone's been missing for 7 to 14 days, that they would go and enter the person into NamUs. Now, you look at a smaller department where they don't have missing persons, but once every couple of years, they may not even know what to do. I believe they can reach out to NamUs and get support in keying their person in, But as far as I know, there is no uniformity from state to state, county to county, whether or not someone gets keyed into NamUs. I have also had the experience of calling a department here in Georgia where they have a missing person listed, like a long-term missing, on their department webpage, and me calling to ask about it, and them going, "We don't have any missing persons. What are you talking about?" So again, it comes down to the culture of the department and then also the experiences of the department. I expect Atlanta PD to do a much better job at keying people into NamUs than I would a little two-car department in rural Georgia.
One of the things I want to do with this conversation is help arm people with the information, the steps that they can take. Now, of course, you have said all law enforcement organizations are different, local versus some of the state police, etc. What are some of the basic things we can arm people with on how to do this? Now, I know that you have said be very careful of sharing your own personal contact information because of the nature of the internet, and people will call and say, "Oh, I have them, but you have to give me money."
That happens, unfortunately. That's called extortion.
Against the law. Still happens.
Still happens all the time.
If I were to say, make a infographic of some of the steps that an average citizen who finds that they're in this situation, what are the first 3, 4, 5 steps that we can guide them with in your experience?
So the first thing you should do is notify law enforcement. Make a call to law enforcement, or better yet, go into the station and file a report. If they will not take a report, if it's a city department, go to the county. Ask the county sheriff to make a report. If the county sheriff won't take it, go to the state police. Your loved one is missing. This is out of character behavior for them. If they are a child or a senior or medically compromised, you don't have to wait 24 hours. If they are missing, they are missing. You need to get on the radar of law enforcement as soon as possible. You need to cast a wide net, which means calling everyone you know and asking, "Have you seen this person? Have you seen this person?" Social media is great for getting the word out. You should have a person's name, a good photo, date and location last seen, and the best way to contact law enforcement, or if you have to contact yourself, you can create a quick email address, missinggenie123@gmail.com. You don't have to put your phone number out there. It's not safe to put your phone number out there. Even on Facebook, there will be people that don't respect boundaries and just want to message you to get the scoop. They just want to get the lowdown, and I find that really irritating because it's wasting the person's time. Getting the word out to law enforcement, calling all of your contacts to see if they have had any contact with your missing person, and using social media judiciously to get the word out about your missing person. There are organizations like Missing in Michigan in several states, in several regions, like the city of Toledo in Ohio. It's not very big, but there is a Toledo missing persons page. Angie, who runs that, is fantastic. There are neighborhood groups that you can make your post in. I would not use the yard sale group, but most communities have a Facebook group that you can make a post in.
One of the things that has come up for me, and I have gotten some pushback online, and I'm sure you have a great deal of experience in this regard. Somebody goes missing. There is a pretty big swell of information. People are distributing that. This person was last seen on the side of the road. This is the only information we know. They're missing. Get the call out. And they are, reported to the area law enforcement agency, and law enforcement is a part of this. And there becomes such like a groundswell of information about this missing person. And then the missing person is located, whether it be they're found and they're injured or not. The public then has a lot of questions.
Yes.
What I try to say to people when they're like, what happened? What happened? I say very unpopular things like, we don't have a right to know what happened after this if the family doesn't want us to know. There comes a place where the family can say, no more. No, we're not going to make comments, or the police can, the law enforcement will share possibly a statement from the family that says, please respect our privacy. We're dealing with this. No other information is going to come out.
And I fully support that. I often know the circumstances of how someone was found, if they were taken into custody, if they were found in hospital, if they were found as an angel, if they just showed up back at home. The two things you need to know is that they were found safe or they were found as an angel. And other than that, it's really up to the family what, if anything, they would like to share.
And the public does not. That, these quasi-journalists, when I say they, could be anybody that's been following the case. You don't have a right to know. We don't have a right to know anything that happened beyond what may have already come out. And then the sleuths pick that up and oftentimes can make the case worse for the family members. But I've tried to say that in some instances where we may never know. We know this person is safe and back with their families. We may never know. When it comes to children particularly, I want to wipe all that out. But if it is an adult.
So I totally get wanting to know. I want to know. I've had people go missing and the family's just like, we found them. They're safe. You can take it down. And I'm like, super curious, but it's not my business. I did my part. I was a good neighbor, a good community member, and that's it. You're not entitled to the details. I get that that's frustrating, and I get that we have a natural curiosity or we get invested in the story, but it's not our right to know, but it is that person's right to privacy. The desire to know, I get being curious, I get being invested, but the best course of action is to respect the wishes of the family.
We truly don't know what's going to happen to that family after that. Again, we don't have to know. We don't have a right to know. But that family could be going through a whole nother experience, whether it's they're in the hospital and that person is injured or worse, and they just don't want to flood the internet sphere with any more information because at that point they're trying to protect that person, hopefully.
Well, or the person checked themselves into rehab and didn't tell their family, or the person is fleeing a domestic violence situation and sharing the status of where they are or how they were found could put them back in danger. It's better to just be grateful that they were found and let it go.
You raised some very important points. It wasn't a traditional disappearance, we'll say, if there's such thing as a traditional. They weren't kidnapped. They didn't temporarily lose their memory. Something very serious was going on in their life, as you say. It could be they decided that they needed to change their lives and go to rehab. Or very seriously, we know how very serious it is to try to escape a domestic violence situation. Time is of the essence for folks. And leaving, it is October. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We should really talk about this.
Yes.
We should be shouting this from the rooftops, that how truly dangerous it is for someone in an abusive situation to leave.
It's the most dangerous time.
And if they decide they're going to slip out under the radar and it becomes a very big public thing, keeping that information quiet after the fact probably becomes that much more difficult.
Well, and that's another reason why it's really important to have a police report and a police contact, because that way you know that the person who's looking for the missing person is acting in good faith.
Another great point to add to it, that abuser could be the one who's flooding the information, right? That didn't even really occur to me until right about now, that maybe that person that is like, this person's missing, call me, I need to know immediately. They could be the one that's hunting them down, lack of a, more appropriate
that's
term.
trying to track the person down. Absolutely. The other thing that I tell families, and I come across this more often than you'd think, is someone who lives a non-traditional lifestyle. Maybe they're transient, maybe they're struggling with addiction, Maybe they're estranged from their family, but they have a friend or a network of friends that they're close with that they keep in contact with. These people go missing, and people that are unhoused go missing, and people that have addiction issues go missing, and people that have warrants go missing. It's not uncommon, and I would never turn away someone who was missing just because of their lifestyle or their background. And I get that a lot. Well, we haven't talked to my brother in 3 weeks, but he's got outstanding warrants. And it's like, if he's missing, he can be missing and have outstanding warrants. He can be missing and struggle with addiction. He can be missing and be unhoused. If you always talk to him on Tuesdays, and this is the third Tuesday in a row without a phone call, let's get them reported to law enforcement. Let's get more people looking for them. I don't tolerate in my group, well, that person is trans or that person's an addict. I don't care. Everyone deserves to be safe.
Absolutely. Everybody deserves to be looked for. Everybody deserves an effort. I agree with you. And I see that. I posted something maybe last year. A child went missing, a teenage child. And they identified as a they.
Mm-hmm.
I got pushback from somebody. Well, you need to say, and who cares what they say they are? I'm like, I'm sharing information the way it has been distributed. And that's how I will share the information.
If you want to have a discussion about gender and self-identity, now is not the time, and this is not the place. You can do that on your own wall, but you're not doing it on mine, and you're not doing it in my group.
That's right.
You can take that somewhere else.
We're not making the rules based on how you feel someone should present as a missing person. There's a missing child. This is the information that was given through the family. This is how the family think it's most important for them to be found. And that's the information we're going to distribute.
I also run into a lot of, with missing teens in particular, oh, they're a runaway. Well, they're still a teenager. Teenagers are not known for making great choices, and we can't find them. So whether or not they're a runaway, we still need to find them. We still need to show care. If you don't want to share a runaway, don't share it. That's fine. But don't come on my wall or come in my group and say, well, they ran away. So what? They're not safe. They're not where they're supposed to be. We need to find them and make sure they're okay, because those runaways become endangered missing very quickly.
And we know that there are predators like shark waiting.
Yes, absolutely.
And with the advent of social media, the way it has been so ingrained in our everyday lives, young people they often don't know at their very tender ages that some of these people who are giving them attention, most of the people who are giving them attention have very bad things in mind for them.
They don't have their best interests at heart. Not at all.
Looking at sort of the whole scape of this that you've taken in over the number of years that you are an advocate. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about your advocate work in a moment. What positive changes have you seen? We talk about all of these terrible stories about, oh, we can't report them. We won't accept a report. It's been X amount of time. This is a runaway. Or, well, you know what? They're a drug addict. So I don't know. I wouldn't waste your energy. Have we gotten better? Have you seen some positive changes over the course of the last, several years that you've been involved in the forefront of this, Nina?
So the good news is, while it seems like more people are going missing than ever before, the numbers are actually decreasing. But things like social media put these missing persons cases in front of us, and we're more aware of them than we ever were before. So the numbers are not increasing, but our awareness of missing persons is increasing, and that's good. I've also seen a shift. You've covered older cases. I've covered older cases where police are dismissive of missing teenagers, and they don't do that anymore. I mean, it happens occasionally, but by and large, the shift has been a positive one that, this is a missing kid. We really need to find this kid. And they jump on it. They take it seriously. They start looking. They do their due diligence. And that's a really positive thing.
I often do live shows, and I I enjoy them despite the subject matter. And
Right.
I often say, I wish all dogs had homes and all missing people returned to their home to their families. I mean that. I truly wish that we could get to a place where, and we are with the advent of forensics and science, and all of those things are very instrumental in helping us find connections for these families who have been going through this. I'll borrow a term from Julie Murray, who I have come to know her and her family and understand very much about her sister Mara's case, this ambiguous loss that they've been dealing with for, Mara has been missing for over 20 and a half years at this point, this ambiguous loss that her families like hers go through. Knowing people like the Murrays, for example, has definitely changed the way I look at these cases, the way I talk about these cases, the way I share information about these cases. And I really hope, speak about myself, I really hope that as I continue to learn about advocacy and continue to learn about the importance of sharing information and how to best support people and how to let families and other people that are associated with a missing person, how to go about at least disseminating that information when time is of the essence. We watch the crime shows. I sure do.
I do.
The first 48 hours is incredibly important when someone goes missing. When someone goes missing and the information, the call out is put, be on the lookout, all of the things. When someone is then found as an angel, I like that term, by the way. I really like that term because it changes the perspective for people. Like, oh, we can say deceased, we can say this, but that changes the perception of what has happened to that person.
I never used that term. Mary, who was my mentor, used the term found as an angel, and people are found, they're found deceased in a number of ways, be it self-harm or they came to harm. But found as an angel is just, it's gentle, and the families are in a situation that is not gentle, so it's a little kindness that you can give them.
What are some of the things that you have been able to do to help the families with the impact of that information? Are there things that as advocates we may be able to do to soften that a little bit, at least in the public sphere, right? Privately, the family has to deal on their own terms. But is there something that we as advocates in this public facing sphere that we might be able to do?
One of the things you and I have talked about is the language that we use. And you were going to shoot me an email the other day. And
I was like,
no,
nope.
Wait, no, we're not doing that.
I was in that Haley Gray
Yes.
thing. Yeah. I was like, oh,
Haley's amazing.
yeah.
But that is important, is to watch how you speak of the person that was recovered, and saying, when someone is recovered, when someone is found as an angel, I always share, sad news. This person was found as an angel. Please keep their friends and family in your thoughts and prayers. And then we leave that posted for several hours so that people know, if they've been following the case, ooh, there's an update and it's not a good one. Mm-hmm. And then leave the family alone. Let them get through what they need to get through. I will, if I've been in contact with a family. I'm not in contact with every family that we share, but the families I am in contact with, I let them know, very sorry for your loss. I have updated the post to reflect they were recovered. Please let me know if I can be of assistance, so that it's not just over. I try and just offer them some words of sympathy and let them know that this is one thing they don't have to take care of, because there's so many things going on. I had a really unusual situation a couple of years ago where a man went missing, and it was one of those scenarios that I knew was not going to go well. His car was found just outside of a forest, and no one had heard from him in several hours. And I thought, okay, this is not great. I hope I'm wrong. And I wasn't wrong. He was recovered and he had self-harmed. And I updated the post on Wednesday, the post that I'd made Monday. On Wednesday, I updated it to reflect that this gentleman was found as an angel. And his son messaged me and said, "You knew on Monday that my dad was dead?" And I said, No. I made the post on Monday. We were looking for him. And then on Wednesday, when I realized that he'd been found, I updated the post. So it was changing Monday's post on Wednesday. And he was like, "Oh, well, thank you for doing that." And I just said, are you, I know you're not okay, but is there anything I can do? And he's like, "No, it was nice of you to make a post for him." And this son and I ended up messaging back and forth for like 3 weeks. And I would just, he's like, "I don't know how I'm going to get through this." And I'm like, you're going to get through this. You just will. And it's going to be awful. And you're going to get through it. And then he just stopped messaging at some point, which was fine. But he decided that I was somebody that he needed to talk to. And I just talked to him and reminded him that he was going to get through it, and that yes, it was terrible, and yes, it was unfair, and he could be angry about it and disappointed, and he would get through it.
It's due in large part to your advocate's heart. You strive for empathy and compassion,
Yes.
like myself. Those are the things that I'm learning. And you have very recently, because we've been talking online about this a bit, and it's something that I really want to do. You have taken victim advocacy certification.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you learned that you're passing on as you deal with all of these families in this very unfortunate situation that families can find themselves in?
So in 2022, I worked with Payne Lindsay on the Tara Grinstead case, which went to trial. And her family was at the trial at the courthouse. And then they were sitting sort of between these two women, these young women that were wearing badges that were very nice. And I said to one of them at one point, I don't know if we were washing our hands or at the drinking fountain or something, I just said, "What is your role? Are you a friend of the family?" "Oh, no, I'm a victim's advocate." And basically what these young ladies did, and they were in their late 20s, early 30s, was they would sit with the families during the trial to be like a buffer, like, "Okay, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. All right, we can leave. I'll walk you out of the courtroom. I will be a buffer for you as we enter and exit the courtroom." They were basically there as a support vehicle for this family that was going through a murder trial. And I was fascinated by it. And then I think we both know Kristen Seavey of Murder, She Told. She's also a credentialed victims advocate. And I thought, okay, I want to do this. I want to learn more about this. So I sought out the training online and I did the course. And I learned so much about, not just about how to talk to families, but what families go through in the court system, in the criminal system, what families have to face when dealing with law enforcement. And it helped me see their situation from a new perspective. Because I'd been doing the missing persons advocacy work, but this really put me in a position to look at my own biases, to look at how families are treated in the face of tragedy when they've been the victim of a violent crime or when their family member has been the victim of a violent crime. And it just opened my eyes to what these families are really going through.
None of us want to be in that club. These families never signed up for this club, and they have been thrown into this. And there is no playbook, as we know. There is no way to know how someone's going to deal with it, once they learn all of these things about what happened to their loved one. And there's certainly no way to truly process it. And as in your very lovely way, Nina, have illustrated that not all law enforcement agencies operate the way we want them to.
And some of it is a product of the environment they're in. I'm sure that law enforcement in Detroit or in Atlanta, they don't have the capacity to give families the time that a smaller department might. So that's where a victim's advocate would come in, to be that buffer between law enforcement and the family, to assist the family when it's time to go to court, to make sure that a family understands their rights under the law. Also, going to the hospital with victims of violent crime, which is something that I hadn't even thought of. But yes, It would be great. I have a dear family friend who was the victim of a violent sexual assault, and no one went to the hospital with her to help her, to explain to her what was going on. There was no one to hold her hand as she went through the rape exam. The nurses were there and they did what they could to be gentle and kind and thoughtful. But if they had had an ally there, it would have made a big difference.
And I've heard stories. One of my favorite podcasts is about I survived, and people tell their stories. One of the resounding things I heard from women who had been victimized and had been assaulted is the re-traumatization sometimes when male officers come in and start questioning them. There's a panic set off, and having somebody who was soft-spoken and someone who was experienced, I think could have made all the difference for some of these women in their recovery. They're dealing with what had happened to them and their recovery from the things that had happened to them.
Yes. It makes a big difference for them to feel that they're not alone, that they have someone on their side.
Is that a role that you would like to take on, or your goal is to go and attend trials with folks in this situation? Is that something that you have done or would like to do?
I have not done it yet. It is something that I would like to do moving forward. We're in the process of moving back to Michigan from Georgia. So when I get settled back in Michigan, I would like to, make myself known to local law enforcement that if they do have someone that needs a victim's advocate, to be on the on-call list. It's a matter of weeks at this point, and I'm so excited to be moving home.
I don't know how much you know about my backstory, but I'm a New Englander and, primarily Massachusetts, a little bit of time in New Hampshire. I have learned, and you mentioned the wonderful Kristen Seavey from Murder, She Told, based in Maine. She's another one of the folks in this space who has just been so kind and so just nice. And that's not always the experience. I worked in commercial radio for a long time, and it's all ego driven. Every ounce of it is ego driven. And we talk about our why. Why do we do this? Because the impact on me and my soul when I started to see how important this work can be changed everything for me. And it's not about me telling jokes on the mic. It's not. It's about, I'm a little snarky because that's just who I am. I'm not going to change. But the impact that this stuff can have on people is just absolutely incredible. And you're so right. If we could have figured some of this stuff out a long time ago, I do believe this stuff would have changed. And one of the things that I've been learning is, through folks like Shayna and Tate's from Light the Way, which is an extraordinary organization that they're really just getting off the ground, but they're doing some great work. The things that I've learned through the Murray family and being involved in the state of New Hampshire has put together this victim survivor advocate group called New Hampshire Missing and Murdered People's Advocacy Coalition. They've had 2 rallies. I've gone to New Hampshire to support, just to be there to support and learn. And I looked at that and I said, Massachusetts needs this. So we are on our way to setting something. We've established something, but we really need to power some energy behind it. But we're very much doing that too, because I'm talking to families. And it's all due to watching and learning and figuring out these families they've got nothing. And in connection with the Murray family, Mara Murray went missing in New Hampshire, but she was from Massachusetts. Massachusetts native, was going to school at UMass Amherst. Nobody in the state, nobody even recognized the fact that she was from Massachusetts and missing from a Massachusetts college. Nobody did anything, and that pissed me off.
Colleges don't like talking about their missing and murdered. It's bad for business.
They don't want to affect their numbers.
So one of the things that Missing in Michigan does really well is in May, we have a Missing Persons Day. And part of the Missing Persons Day is to have the survivors, the family members who are dealing with ambiguous loss, come and have a private family-only session. Because how often do you get to talk to someone who understands exactly what you're going through? These families have built lifelong friendships. They support each other. I see them on Facebook. I'm like, I'm friends with this one and that one, and they also know each other. And I've been welcomed by these families, which I feel very privileged. I'm very honored that they trust me. But they get the opportunity to network with each other. And that makes such a big difference, because when you're feeling down about having a missing loved one, you can call your best friend, but they don't get it the way that somebody who's been through it gets it. So I try so hard, even dealing with cases now, when I come across a family that doesn't have support, I try and put them in contact with an existing family so that they at least have somebody to sort of bounce ideas off of or just vent to sometimes. Because it's okay, you're going to be angry. And it's okay to be angry, and it's helpful to be angry around people that get why you're angry and may share some of that same frustration or disappointment. Because it does feel incredibly lonely, I imagine.
I've heard some of the responses from these family members who say, one woman, Jane Borowski, probably at least heard that name. She is said to be the lone survivor of the Connecticut River killer along the New Hampshire-Vermont border. And she's very involved in this New Hampshire coalition. And she said at one point during one of her speeches during the event, she said, victim advocate? I don't even know what a victim advocate is.
Oh, wow.
She was attacked and stabbed several times back in the late 80s. Survived, thankfully. Was pregnant, was expecting her daughter. Her daughter was born. Her daughter is wonderful. Her daughter is the hugest supporter of her mom. They're almost always together at these events. But imagine for a moment, you're young, you're pregnant. She was, not too far away from delivering that baby, 7 or 8 months pregnant. This horrible event happens to you, and there's nothing. The law enforcement agency where you were attacked, this took place. There may not even
have been a female officer to talk to.
Nothing. She didn't even know until all of these years later, when she, just like you said, when she started to meet other people who lost a loved one, who has an ambiguous loss, their loved one is still missing, there's no information, or there might be some information. And another thing, Nina, that I discovered, again, I'm learning. I was rock and roll radio girl forever, interviewing people and making jokes. What I've discovered is a lot of these families, they know exactly who the perpetrators are. Yep. But the law enforcement agencies are like, we don't have enough to get them.
The prosecutor won't take it. That's a huge issue with missing persons cases. It takes a prosecutor that has some gumption, some backbone, to prosecute a no-body murder. And a lot of these cases are unprosecuted because the prosecutor is inexperienced or overly cautious. They know they only get one bite at the apple. They don't want to blow it, so they just don't prosecute. And these families suffer. I just interviewed Mary's sister, went missing Halloween night, 1969. Pam and Patty went missing that night. And Mary says she has a real good idea who did it, but hasn't gone anywhere. The person who killed these 2 women is still walking free and probably living in the same community.
That is the case with this young woman, Trish Haynes, in northern New Hampshire. That is the case with this young woman, Charlene Rosemond. They know. She knew the people. Her family believes they know exactly who's involved. Same thing. We don't have enough information.
So frustrating. The other thing to keep in mind when I talk about the importance of families, and you've talked about this also, the importance of families getting to talk to other families, is you can't even find a therapist that can help you with this. When you go through something like this, it is incredibly isolating. You need to have other people that understand to some extent what you are going through and what you continue to go through. And it's so important, this New Hampshire coalition, the Missing in Michigan meetup every year. It's just so important that these families find community to support them.
Amen. Thank you for spending some time with me. I'm very encouraged by maybe the kindness and empathy that I have seen everyday, citizens share. There's a fraction of our population who are not my problem, and we can't be those people.
No.
What are some everyday citizen advocacy calls to action? What are some of the things that regular people who aren't in this true crime advocacy world that we're in, that we're learning, what are some important takeaways?
If you have children, please tell your children that they can tell you things without getting in trouble, because your child is going to find themselves in a situation where they shouldn't be there, but they need to be able to call you and say, come get me, without getting in trouble. Let your kids know that they've got a mulligan if they find themselves in a bad situation, or the person they're with is about to drive drunk, or they're at a party where they feel uncomfortable. They need to know that they can call you and they will be picked up without judgment, without a lecture. It is more important that your child get home safe. And I think everybody can agree with that. Please look at your kids' phones. They are far less likely to be trafficked at the mall than they are to be trafficked from Snapchat or TikTok or somebody in their phone. So please be aware of who they are talking to online. And again, let your kids know that they can come to you and share their fears or the situation they found themselves in without consequence. We had a boy in northern Michigan who was facing a sextortion situation. He could not come up with the money, and he chose to end his own life. If he had gone to his parents, he could have gotten out of that situation, but he was afraid they would be angry at him because he'd sent nudes. So please talk to your kids and let them know that you are a safe person, and do that not just with your words, but your actions. Having a positive relationship with you is the best way to keep them safe. When you're online, please take a moment to look at and, if appropriate, share missing persons posters. Not every poster will be appropriate for you to share, but if it is, please do. And same thing, follow your local police department. It'll let you know what's going on in your community, things that you should be aware of to keep yourself and your community safe.
One police department created a graphic that they shared, and no, missing persons cases don't generate from your yard sale group.
That was Garden City, Kansas. Missing persons posters do not originate in yard sale groups. Amen.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything about you and the work that you do, in your kindness, just willingness to help. And I had heard about Nina Innsted and Already Gone. I had a few listeners early on. They're like, I listened to this show and took that as a compliment. Like, I love Nina's show, and now I listen to your show, and you're two of my favorite shows. I'm like, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
I can't wait for True Crime Podcast Festival to come to my neck of the woods.
Yes.
Next summer.
I'm exciting.
The True Crime Podcast Festival has been really instrumental in really helping me see what's going on in this world of, I'll call it the true crime sector or the sphere. It's been really important for me to see the players and what it really should be, and the people that are really trying to make the biggest impact in this space, because it is very gross. I remember when I first started, I looked at it very differently. I wasn't exploitative, but I was a little bit more jokey about things, which I have changed course considerably since. It's very important not to be part of the fray of, the top 5 sexiest serial killers. I'm like,
oh, gross.
Fuck off with that. Well, thank you, Miss Nina. She's a former teacher. I don't know the age level of the students she taught, but I'm just imagining that she was called Miss Nina. Thank you, Nina Innsted, host of Already Gone podcast, victims advocate, one of the main administrators for the Missing in Michigan Facebook group, which is 135,000 strong. Nobody wants a loved one to disappear. But if it does happen, and I hope it doesn't, I'm hoping that this better arms you or someone you come in contact with someday that may experience this, that this information can be helpful and you can put that advocacy into action immediately to find that loved one. And all of these things ring true. I talk about it all the time. I don't care if a child is considered a runaway. The child needs to be found. I don't care if the child identifies as something else. That's not a discussion I'm going to have with parents who are trying to find their child. And I don't think I need to explain that there are a whole new host of issues with raising children than perhaps there had been when we were younger. But we want to save all of the people, not just some of the people. We want to find everybody. You know, if someone's brother goes missing and they've had trouble with the law, we shouldn't say, don't bother. Someone has addiction issues. We don't say, don't bother. Everybody's worth saving. I'll quote Chance the Rapper, which I have in the past. Everybody's somebody's everything. Nobody's nothing. We can't be a society that picks and chooses who we want to save. And if I can be completely honest with you, I usually am. Why stop now? Shitty people don't want to help others. Don't be a shitty person. Quote me. Thank you to all of the people that we mentioned throughout this episode. We mentioned the True Crime Podcast Festival, which is coming to Boston in July 2025. I'm really looking forward to everybody being in my backyard. We talked about the true crime research training, which I want to take. We talked about victim advocacy training, which I plan on taking. Massachusetts Missing and Murdered Persons Advocacy Coalition, which I am a part of, which we are building in the new year. I mentioned the New Hampshire Missing and Murdered Coalition, which is very active. All of this information, by the way, will be linked at crimeofthetruestkind.com. Go to the episode page. Everything about Nina and Nina's podcast, Already Gone. Everything about a lot of these folks I mentioned. Mind Over Murder, Murder She Told, Light the Way Advocacy Project, Jane Borowski, Trish Haynes, Charlene Rosemond, all cases unsolved. And all the amazing things I learned about the Great Lakes, all linked, crimeofthetruestkind.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting Crime of the Truest Kind. Follow at Crime of the Truest Kind. Listen to the show, tell your friends about it, share it in your favorite Facebook groups. The relevant Facebook groups, clearly. I mean, don't go to a yard sale page and post about my true crime podcast. I mean, I suppose you could, but that would be weird. Send me an email. Tell me if there's some place that I should look into to bring the show. I'd love to get closer to all of you so you can attend. You can support the show on Patreon. 4 tiers starting at just $1. The monthly mini is coming up this week. I believe it's going to be about the Witch of Groton. Spooky season. Shouts to my superstar honorary executive producer patron, Lisa McCogan. I always feel like there's something else I wanted to tell you. If you're still here, you've already sat through so much. And there's now a newsletter. You can sign up for it at crimeofthetruestkind.com. Gotta go. Bye. Lock you goddamn doors.